You're listening to the weekly Dartscast. 180!
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast. I'm Alex Moss and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
I am doing just fantastic, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing well too, thank you. We've got lots to bring you this week. We've just got off the phone with the three guests who you're going to hear from later. All three are Pdc Tour card holders that are going to be playing in the Super Series next week in Milton Keynes. Jelle Klaasen, Adam Hunt and Alan Tabern all joining the show later on. But we're going to start this week away from the PDC, and I put out on Twitter, football's coming home on July the 11th. Well, on January 1st, 2022, darts is coming home. The WDF announcing on Sunday that their first World Championship will be held at the Lakeside, the 1st to the 9th of January 2022. What were your thoughts when you saw the news?
It's the best possible result. The WDF, originally we were going to hopefully have seen it back in this past January, but for obvious reasons that wasn't able to come to be. Thankfully, it looks like the WDF will have the World Championship next year, and it's where it needs to be. It should be at the Lakeside. The WDF is the spiritual successor to the BDO. The other organizations are going to do their best to stick their part to be the head of amateur darts, but at least spiritually, the WDF is the successor apparent. And if they want to be that successor apparent, they need to get in the Lakeside, and they need to do it right. And so far at least, they are doing it right. They got the Lakeside figured out. They got a television network figured out. They got some sponsors lined up, and they did all of this prior to making the announcement so that they wouldn't embarrass themselves like the BDO did when they announced on this show that the prize fund, for example, was going to be doubled for the women's. That didn't come to be. When they said that they had all the sponsors lined up for the World Championship, that didn't come to be. At the very least, they're doing this right, and they're putting it where it needs to be. There's still a lot of questions, and some of those we'll get to later, so I don't want to go through all of the things that still need to be sorted over the coming months. And that will really answer whether this will succeed, whether this even can succeed, let alone whether it in fact will. But so far, so good. And this is the perfect first step to having the WDF not just be the spiritual successor to BDO, but as the head of amateur darts, but to in fact realize that.
And I'll start with what my nan said when I told her the news at the weekend that darts was coming back to Lakeside. Her response was, everyone associates darts with the Lakeside, don't they? And there is that generation, lots of generations that do associate darts with the Lakeside. I guess moving forward now, we've got the Ali Pali, which is well established with the PDC World Championship. So you've got more newer generations associating darts with Ali Pali. But for a lot of darts fans, they still think of Lakeside when they think of darts. And it's great news for the WDF that they can get the Lakeside. And I know there's a few people that are saying maybe we should move on from the Lakeside. They should maybe look at other venues. But I think certainly for this first one, at least, having that familiarity, this is going to be a big week for the WDF when it comes round, putting on their first World Championship. They want to come back with a bang. And are we going to see the WDF host their World Championship at Lakeside for 34 years like the BDO? I don't think they will. I think over time, we'll see them maybe move around. We've seen the World Masters, their first World Masters, which is coming up in December. They're taking it away from England for the first time. It's going to be in the Netherlands, and I think that's probably what we're going to see with this World Championship. I'm not going to say it's going to be a one-year thing at the Lakeside, but I think maybe 5-10 years down the line we might see them maybe explore other options. It depends really where they are, I guess, commercially and popularity-wise. If they're able to sell out bigger venues, that might be a route that they go down. But we had the first WDF ranking event for 15 months that took place this past weekend in New Zealand, the early hours here in the UK on Sunday. And then the news coming out that Lakeside is going to be the venue. And it is good to see that the WDF starting to progress things. It's been a long time waiting for them with no events to put on. And as we touched on before, it's hard to get anything going, build that momentum during a pandemic when you've not got any events on. But as we are seeing things start to open up a little bit around the world in certain countries, and we've got 50 plus events coming up from the WDF for the second half of this year, for the first year to get it back, and as well the TV coverage as well, to get it on Eurosport, which is where the BDO World Championship was put on for the last couple of years. It was held, I think, is a good stepping stone as well. So yeah, for me, it's a thumbs up for them, and I think there'll be a lot of darts fans that will be keeping their eye out to see when the tickets go on sale that they can get back to the home of World Darts to watch the darts.
When they do get back to the home of World Darts to watch the darts, there'll be even more players participating, as WDF announcing that the men's field will be 48, up from the 40 that the BDO had in their last World Championship. Ladies field up to 24 from 16, and the youth event will start at the semi-final stages on this big stage, not just the final, over the 9 days at the beginning of January. But considering it's still just 9 days and there's going to have to be an additional, I guess, 18 matches now, is that too many games to fit into just a short amount of time?
Yeah, I think this is probably something that not many people have touched on really, and quite rightly, the news that the WDF are going to have a World Championship next year and it is going to be at the Lakeside, that did dominate the headlines. But beyond that, extending the field, if you like, for the men's, the ladies and the youth on stage, that is something that is worth talking about. And we've got to mention that the number of days that this event is going to be played over is the same as it was before under the BDO. It is still going to be the 9 days, and to fit in an extra 18 games, it's going to be interesting to see how they pull it off, because the WDF, surely they would have looked at, before increasing the field, how they were going to fit it into the schedule. And I'm sure they have got a schedule in place, just not released yet. But how are they going to do it? Are they going to look to maybe put on an extra session on that Sunday, the second Sunday, and have a finals day and have a afternoon session with the ladies and the youth final, and then the evening session with the men's final? That might be one way of fitting in an extra couple of games. But I think you're probably looking at a shorter format, especially for the men's event, which has been best of 13 sets, matches up with the PDC World Championship for a long time, best of 11 sets for the semi-final. I think you'll probably see that format come down a little bit. The ladies, we've always been advocates of that format going up rather than down, and we've seen the final go up to a best of 5, which hopefully we'll see that stay. But it's going to be difficult to fit all these games in, and will they even stick with the sets? Will they maybe go to a leg play format instead of the sets? That's something that's still yet to be decided or determined. So lots of questions to be answered, and we are hopeful of getting Bill Hatter, the WDF president, on the show very soon to have a chat about all things WDF. Just looking at the rankings as well, I wanted to touch on them. They're going to keep all the ranking points from 2020, those first couple of months, held over into this race to get to the Lakeside. So you've got Martin Adams in 8th spot. Are we going to see him get back to the Lakeside again? Fallon Sherrick, who missed out on the last BDO World Championship, she's high up in the rankings. Could be a chance for her to finally become a world champion in darts. So lots of different subplots that we're going to be following over the next 6 months. But yeah, one of the big questions is, how are they going to fit all these games in?
Yeah, and that's, that brings up what I alluded to in the first question, and that's that we still don't know a lot, and that's going to help determine whether this will succeed. We don't know, most importantly, we don't know the prize fund, and I think that's smart. I think you don't want to announce that until you are sure that you're able to meet whatever that prize fund you announced it is. You mentioned Fallon Sherrick missing out on the last World Championship. That was by her choice when the prize fund got significantly slashed at the last moment. Other players thought about pulling out, but decided to participate. She decided not to, and that was her right, especially after she became a household name with her brilliant run in the PDC World Championship, knocking off 2 players and running Chris Dobie tight in the third round. So she didn't need to go and play for a drastically reduced prize fund, and she didn't. WDF is going to make sure that, hopefully will make sure that whatever the prize fund is, it's known well in advance by all the competitors, and that they can and will pay out whatever is announced. But we also don't know the format, and that will help decide whether this can be done over 9 days. There is that possibility that you mentioned that, if it is the same length, you're going to have to squeeze in 18 additional matches into 9 days. That's in essence 2 matches a day, or a little over 1 match per session, because historically there's only been 1 session on the Sunday. Usually it's just one. Sometimes it's been 1 long session on a Saturday, sometimes 2. It can be done if you want to keep it at the same length, but I think what you said there would be right, where you'd have to have all the finals, have the youth and ladies final in the early session and have the men's final in the afternoon session, then have all the semifinals on the Saturday and go from there. And that will give you the time to work those matches in, especially if you go to a shorter format for that first round, kind of like the PDC used to do for the preliminary round, best of 3. if you're doing that for the first round of 48 in the men's, I should say, the ladies with the round of 24 will probably already be best of 3. It can be done. If not, you'll have to go to a shorter format or add in leg play, but that's all to be determined. And I think we'll get more clarity, hopefully, from the president of the WDF in the coming days if he comes on the show, but if not, from the WDF once they have worked out those logistics. I think they'll do whatever makes sense. They'll have to. But whether it's too many games to fit in, no. But you'll have to make adjustments, whether that is a shorter format or whether that is completely reconceptualizing the fixture list. Something will have to be done. We'll see what that is.
Well, we've been talking about Lakeside. Let's hear from a former Lakeside champion. Here's our first guest in our chat with the former BDO world champion, Jelle Klaasen.
I'm joined today by the former champion of the world, Jelle Klaasen. Jelle, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Now, we had you on last year, right as the pandemic was getting going back in March, just after your run to the quarterfinals in Minehead, traveling home after the last Pro Tour as things just started to shut down. How were you feeling back then?
At that time, I felt great. I thought it's going to be an amazing year, but everything went different from that moment.
Yeah, no kidding. And no one knew what was coming next. PDC, of course, put on the home tour a few months later. But how did you find taking that initial time off away from the tour as things paused for a couple months? Did you use that time to take a break from darts, or were you practicing at home, or what?
I think the first couple of weeks I didn't practice at all because, there was no telling when we were going to start. So we knew it was going to take a while for the tournaments to get back. So I knew I had some time to take a rest and then a few weeks to get ready again. So no, the first couple of weeks I didn't do much.
Now, of course, once that home tour got going, you did fairly well, making it all the way to the final group. How did you find the switch from what you've obviously been doing most of your life, playing darts in person, to having to play competitively online?
I think the idea was great, and I think a lot of people liked it because I think online playing against each other hasn't been more popular since the last 2 years. But for me, it was difficult to stay focused because in the home tour, it was a little bit easier because you only had to tell your score, but still you had to wait for your opponent to throw, and then some opponents couldn't count that well, so you were waiting a long time before you could throw again. And for a fast player like me, it was pretty hard. And I didn't play great, but I was finishing great, so that was one of the reasons I made it to the final. But no, it was a nice experience, and all credits to the PDC to make something happen so that we could play competitive again.
Now, of course, then come July, the summer series, and finally the return to competitive in-person darts. Being in the Netherlands, you're one of the players who were having to travel over in order to come to play. How did you find the traveling, at least those first few times during the pandemic?
We're used to traveling, so it wasn't that big of a problem. Only you have to do the COVID test a day before you travel. So you were allowed to travel. Then we had to do the test when we arrived. So the testing was more of an issue than the traveling because we had to do that anyway. But to see that all the English were complaining when they had to travel to Germany, and they thought it was a big risk and it was a lot of trouble. I think all the European players like me and all the Dutch guys were thinking, we do that every day, every tournament for years. So we thought, it was a little bit easy for them to say, no, we stay at home. But I understand if you don't want to take a risk, it's okay. But we always travel. So it was nice to see them have to do the same efforts as we have to do. But no, it's the traveling doesn't. It's not a problem. We're used to it.
Of course, last year after the season resumed, it wasn't your best season. Ended up having to go to the World Championship qualifier the first time, I think, since 2005 at the Lakeside. What was it like having to play in that?
It was a lot of pressure. I think if for me, if I have to play qualifiers for the Worlds, it's a big disappointment because I think I should always be one of the seeded players, in my opinion. But I knew I didn't have the best of years, even though I was averaging more than most people above me. I didn't get the results, missing a lot of match darts, people playing great against me. I think I'm one of those opponents that people love to play because I always play just darts and don't distract anyone, so everyone can play their own game against me, and yeah, they always seem to play their best game. But no, it was, even though I played well and scoring. I was scoring well last year, but my doubles weren't that good, so that was the reason that I didn't qualify for the Worlds, because finishing it was terrible. Even in the qualifiers, I lost against Niels Sonneveld. I missed so many doubles. Should have won that game pretty easy, but if you don't hit your doubles, you will never win.
You mentioned the pressure, and you mentioned that match against Niels Sonneveld meant that you didn't qualify for the World Championship. How hard was it to take missing out on Worlds?
I think as a professional dart player, if you don't qualify for the Worlds, I think that's the biggest disappointment, because that's the biggest tournament of the year. If you just play normal the whole year, you should qualify. And to be fair, I think I played above average the whole year. I think I had a 94 average for the whole year, something like that. And I was losing matches with 100 average, playing well, missing one or two match darts. And then you see other players win with an 82 or sometimes with a 78 average. And you think, why can't I have that luck sometimes? But yeah, that's just the way it goes. People know I'm playing well, so they play well against me. They don't underestimate me, and they play a good game. So it's all up to me to play even better. And I feel great. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the year.
So let's talk though then about 2021. Obviously, because of Q School getting delayed because of the pandemic, there was a late start with the season not starting till near the end of February. How did you use that extra time? Was it just, did you use it as a reset, or were you working on your game, or what?
After I didn't qualify for the Worlds, I was trying to find something to get that great feeling again. I tried a lot of different type of darts. I went back to an old set. Unicorn has been a great help. Every time I said, I want to try this, they made a prototype for me. So I think I was trying to find something that felt confident, like 2015, 16, that everything, it felt just great. And I think at this time I found a setup that works really well, and I can't wait to try it at the Pro Tours.
Well, so far this year, made a few last 16s, and your averages, according to Darts Oracle, friend of the show, is up 2 points so far this year on last year. Do you feel like you're back on the up?
Yeah, I really believe I'm only getting better and better. I think the biggest issue for me is normally before COVID, my best practice were small local tournaments, just to get the confidence, and because normally you win those tournaments pretty easy, and even though it's a small tournament, it feels good, it gives you confidence, and that was my biggest practice of the week on Tuesday or Wednesday evening. And now practicing all alone, it's difficult to get that pressure in a game when you practice on your own. So I really do miss the tournaments, but now they're starting again in Holland. So I just can't wait to get the confidence back and get that rhythm of playing tournaments every week back. Because if you have a summer super series and then you have to wait a month and a half doing nothing, that's not good for your rhythm.
We're all looking forward to those events going back on. Hopefully they're back very soon. Now, currently 58th in the order of merit, defending some money at the World Championships at the end of the year. It's a big 6 months coming up for you. How do you feel about the challenges of getting to Worlds this year and keeping your tour card?
To be completely honest, I don't really think about it, because I know I'm playing well enough to go for in every tournament. So I'm just depending on I'm just counting on my talent and my abilities to play well and make sure that I'm qualifying for the Worlds. And if I have to go to Q school, of course, it's something you don't want to do. But I think I'm good enough to qualify. So I wouldn't be panicking, but I'd rather avoid Q school and just qualify for the World. So that's my number one priority. Just get enough points on the rankings to qualify for the World Championships, or maybe win a qualifier. It doesn't matter for me. As long as I play the World Championships this year, it's a success.
You mentioned playing Worlds as the number one target this year. Do you have any other targets or goals this year, or are you just taking it one tournament at a time?
No. At this moment, it's easy for me to just say qualify for the Worlds, because that means I keep my tour cards, and that's the only priority at the moment. And if I do that next year, my target is going back into the top 32 of the world. But I know all too well that you can only do that if you qualify for TV tournaments, because if you don't do that, you won't get far in the ranking. So no, it's at the moment I'm just focused on the Worlds, and I believe that will happen.
Now, away from the darts, we've also seen you've been on the golf course a bit. How long have you been golfing for, and is it something that helps take your mind off the darts?
Yeah, I think the first time I played golf was about 20 years ago. I did it maybe 2 or 3 times with an old friend of mine, and then maybe 3-4 years ago, a guy I met in the darts store, he was playing golf, and he asked me if I wanted to join him. And I think in the first year I played 2 or 3 times with him. And then since last year, because of COVID, I thought I want to find a hobby, something to get my mind off the darts. And I started playing golf again. Just got my license in how much you needed to play the courses. So I did that. And now every week, 2 or 3 times, I'm on the driving range or getting lessons. So it's a nice distraction, and I really love the game.
And lastly, and most importantly, we know you're a big football fan, as of course is your wife. It's good to see the Netherlands back in a big tournament after missing the last couple. How do you think they're going to do at Euro 2020?
That's a difficult question, because I don't think it's the best Dutch team ever. But I think we're growing every game we play, and as long as our coach will do the correct setup of the team, we can terrific things, because I think if we play well, we're still one of the best in the world. But at this moment, I think we have to be a team again, and hopefully in the next few games they will start playing like a team and do what they can, and that's winning games.
Well, Jelle, thank you for joining us. Best of luck with the Super Series, and best of luck for the Netherlands at Euros 2020.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Jelle for joining us. Now let's look ahead to the 4th Super Series coming up next week. The return of the Iceman, Gerwyn Price, set to play for the first time since testing positive for COVID-19 at the Premier League a couple of months ago. What are you expecting from the world number one next week?
It's really, really difficult to judge, because we've seen some players come back after testing positive for COVID, and it was like nothing had happened. Most notably, Stephen Bunting, who had to withdraw from the World Grand Prix, a couple Euro Tour events, who didn't qualify for the European Championships for the first time in his PDC career, and then only went on and made the semifinals at the World Championship before losing to Gerwyn Price in a match that he could have won. We could have been talking Stephen Bunting just a couple months on from having COVID being the world champion. He was not that far from doing that, and he played some really, really good stuff, especially where it matters. But at the other end of the spectrum, we've seen Glenn Durrant continue to struggle. He's not been the same since having COVID, and it's impossible to know what to expect. I would think that Gerwyn Price would be a little rusty, because he hasn't had competitive darts. It's not just that he missed out on the Premier League. He also pulled out of Super Series event. So he's not played competitive darts since around the time of the UK Open or shortly thereafter. So it's been a very long gap for him. And most of the people he will be competing against, with a few exceptions, will have at least played the last Super Series event, although that is now nearly 2 months ago. So I guess everyone will be rusty. But there'll be some rust, but we just don't know what he will look like. And, it's also been the case in other sports, especially when someone's had an extended absence where you really don't know. Don't talk nearly enough ice hockey. We'll be talking some football later. We don't talk nearly enough ice hockey. But it took Mika Zibanejad of the New York Rangers about a month and a half after he was recovered from COVID before he started looking like his former self. And then he was brilliant. Gerwyn Price, you would expect, at some point, will be back to looking like the world number one, because he is the world number one and he's deservedly the world number one. Will he be this week? It's really impossible to say. He might, or he might have 4 days where he really struggles. I think at some point he'll get back to it. It might just take a couple of these Super Series events before he's back to his top game.
Yeah, I think we're going to try and cover as many sports as we can on this week's show, because I've got a couple to note down here as well. You touched on Stephen Bunting missing out on the World Grand Prix, and then we had him on the show just after that run at Ali Pali, getting to the semi-finals and looking back at when he tested positive, and it kind of turned things around for him, getting to the semi-finals, pushing Gerwyn Price close. But other players, it's been difficult for them to come back after that. We've seen in other sports as well that COVID-19 is still a thing, even in sports, live sports, even during events as well. We saw this past weekend in the golf, John Rahm, 6-shot lead in the Memorial Tournament, and then he's out on the course and gets told that he tested positive. I think a lot of people have seen that video, even if they're not golf fans. I've certainly seen it, and it was, shocking to see that. And Gerwyn Price, easily the most high-profile case of someone testing positive for the virus in the PDC and missing such a big event like the Premier League. It wasn't just a week event as we know it. It covered the last couple of months, and he's missed out on a lot of darts. And he was speaking to BBC Wales this week. I was reading an interview that he's done this week, speaking to them, and he was saying that he's missed darts immensely, and this is coming from someone that said in interviews not so long ago that after the World Championship, winning that, he lost a bit of motivation for darts. So I guess absence makes the heart grow fonder for him. He's itching to play again. He said the first couple of games is probably going to be a little bit tense for him, a bit of rust, as you say. But I think once he gets back into the swing of things, I think we're going to see how well he was last year. I think we're going to see him carry on, because he is a player that has continued to rise over the last 12 months. And even this year so far, I know he's missed the last couple of months, but he's had a couple of semi-finals on TV, the Masters, the UK Open, won a Players' Championship, got to another final as well, and he's put in some great performances so far, a lot of 100-plus averages, high 90 averages. I'm expecting him to come back with a bang, whether it's the first day or the second day, I'm not so sure, but I think having them blocks like we still do with the 4 events, I think it will take him a couple of days maybe to get back into it, but I think by the end of the week, he will be firing again, and we could see him pick up another title.
Now, 8 events left before the cutoff for the World Matchplay, which, of course, will be returning to the Winter Gardens after a year away. Next week is going to be a big one with half of those events taking place. Which players do you have your eye on the most?
Well, going from one Welshman to another, I've got to mention Johnny Clayton, the newly crowned Premier League champion, and we touched on it in our chat with Mark Webster last week. The next big event is the World Matchplay, and as things stand, whether he's going to be a seed or he's going to be a Pro Tour qualifier, and a lot of the seeds will be hoping that he does jump into that top 16, and there's not much of a gap between him and Ian White. Johnny Clayton currently 17th, I think it's around £1,500, and you've got to remember as well that Johnny Clayton skipped the last Super Series in Germany. If he'd have gone to that, the form that he's been in this year, we'd probably be talking right now that he is a top 16 player, but he's got 8 events to push into that top 16 to be one of the seeds. And as I say, I think a lot of the seeded players will be hoping that he does push into that top 16, because drawing the Premier League champion in the first round of the World Matchplay, not the ideal draw for a lot of players. And aside from that, though, it's weird because usually in the race to the World Matchplay, we're seeing European Tour events, we're seeing Players' Championship events week in, week out. But for the last couple of years, last year, this year, there's been a lot of gaps between the events, and particularly this year, gaps between the Super Series, 6 weeks since the last one, the third one. So a lot of the players will know where they stand in the race to the World Matchplay, but can't do anything about it until next week when the events get back up and running again. And the pressure is going to ramp up these next 2 Super Series to get into the field. We've got 8 players, I think, currently set to make their debuts, some of them more comfortable than others. You've got Devon Peterson, Damon Heta right at the top of that Pro Tour qualifier list, who you'd say that they're in Blackpool right now, they're booking their B&B for that. But there's other players a little bit further down. Ryan Searle currently in 16th, who is just in there, I think, just on count back at the moment from Darius Labanauskas. All these players pushing to get into the World Matchplay for the first time. And there's some established names that are pushing to keep their runs of getting into it. Simon Whitlock, Adrian Lewis, who we didn't see in the last Super Series. What's he going to be like after having a longer break than most players? Raymond van Barneveld, we know he's had his health issues this year, but he's also had a lot of success on the hockey, winning a title, and he's still well within a shout of getting to Blackpool. Another player I got mentioned as well, Jelle Cullen, the Pro Tour #1. The last time we saw him was that appearance at Bullseye when he won all that money for charity. We've not seen him play PDC darts for a little while. I'm interested to see if he's kept up his form as well.
Yeah, there's so much to play for, and it is so tight right now in that race, and that's where I want to start about who I most have my eyes on, because right now on Countback, Ryan Searle's in that last spot, but there are 6 players within 1,000 pounds of him, including, as you mentioned, Stephen Bunting, also Jamie Hughes, who's been there the last couple of years, right there just outside. That's how tight it is right now. It's, there's always a competitive race, or almost always is a competitive race, especially as you get down to those last few events. But I can't recall there ever being a time where just a couple weeks out, there were 6 players this close. Granted, when there are fewer events, it will tend to be more compact, but even still, that's really tight. But there's a few players who aren't that far behind that. One of our guests, Adam Hunt's only a couple 1,000 pounds out of it. You mentioned Simon Whitlock, who hasn't failed to qualify since he made his first one over a decade ago. He's pulled himself to under 4,000 pounds behind Saul for that last spot. Raymond van Barneveld in his first year back as a tour card holder still in with a chance. If he makes a final, he'll be right back there. But there are other players who usually make it and have made it for a long time who are well adrift. Steve Beaton, over 8,000 pounds out of it. But you go back 4 years ago, this is about the position he was in mid-June 4 years ago. What did he do? He only went and won a Players' Championship event in Wigan and got himself into the World Matchplay and started playing fantastic darts again. If anyone is going to do that, it's Steve Beaton. And I just want to see how he does for that reason, because, Dan Dawson will be great on commentary if he does it, and he does have more lives than a cat. Adrian Lewis, who you mentioned, Adrian Lewis could win a title. That still wouldn't get him in. That's how far he is adrift. In fact, just barely ahead of Aaron Beeney in the race. But beyond those players who are trying to get in, I really want to see how some of those players who we haven't seen in quite some time get on. You mentioned Joe Cullen. We haven't seen him in a while. He was playing great at the start of the year, missed out on the Premier League, hasn't kept going with those same heights, but now hopefully now that the Premier League's over and he's seen his good friend lift the title, will be go back to what he had seen. I'm also curious to see how those players who just played the Premier League get on. Joe Zidasausa, most likely. I think he is on the verge, as I said a couple weeks ago, of just smashing everyone every time. He really looks like he is the best or one of the best players every single time he plays. I would not be surprised if he wins 2 titles this week. He doesn't need to. His ranking is fine. Although a couple of titles would move into the top 10 for the first time. But I just want to see what he does because he's playing so well. You expect that he'll win 2 of these titles because that's just how good he's playing. And I'm really curious to see how he gets on.
Lots to play for next week. Let's hear from a player who is in the race to qualify for the World Matchplay for the first time this year. Here's our chat with Adam Hunt. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the 5-time PDC title winner, Adam Hunt. Thanks for the time, Adam. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, man. Cheers, man.
First of all, I've got to say, if I had a game of darts with my brother and he threw a 170 finish and a 9-darter against me, I don't think I'd be wanting to play him for a while. Has your brother Scott started speaking to you again yet?
To be fair, I think he was more happy than me for hitting that. Yeah, he was apparently he had his arms in the air, when the first treble went in, and then he gave a massive kick and a massive pull when I hit it. So yeah, it was nice to hit one. Fortunately, it was against him, but yeah, it wasn't him.
Happy days. We've been playing in the PDC for 10 years now, but let's rewind back to the start for you. What are your earliest memories in darts, and what was it that made you catch the bug to play yourself?
I don't know. I mean, I've been playing since I was about 7 or 8 year old, I think, in the house. My dad and my granddad used to play in the leagues and stuff, and we've always had a dartboard in our house. So yeah, I've played in the house since I was about a 7-8-year-old, and then I think it was my brother that seen a local youth competition time we were up at 13 or 14, and I just thought I'd that just to see how good I was, or test myself against people.
And I want to take you back to November 2010 in Barnsley. You played in the very first PDC Under-21 World Championship, now known as the World Youth Championship. You came through a Riley's qualifier to get into the event. What do you recall from that qualifier and then playing in the event?
Riley Sunderland, I think, was about 32 players. So I remember there's a couple of the North East Youth Darts was really good back then. And there was a couple of names, and I was in the opposite half of the draw of them, so I thought I had a quite good chance to get through here. And I remember playing Michael Wood in the final, even though we were both through, we still finding it was Gary Wood's son. Yeah, we both got through.
So going back to that first World Youth Championship, you lost out to Michael Van Gerwen in a last leg decider in the last 32. In the start of 2011, you entered the first ever Q School at the age of 17, I think you were then. What was it that persuaded you to give it a go straight away?
Well, I've never actually played a video competition, and it was my brother actually. He was doing alright. Not Scott, who you had on the show. It was David, my brother, my other brother, I should probably just give it a go, just to see where my game's at and stuff. And he ended up paying for us and coming down with me. I can't remember much of it, to be fair, but obviously it got us straight into the Pro Tour. I didn't get a tour card, but it wasn't as big as it was back then, so I got into pretty much every Pro Tour anyway. So yeah, it was a good experience, and that just kind of started from there.
Yeah, definitely. I was looking back at the results. You came very close on that final day, losing out in the final round. But as you say, you were able to get into quite a lot of the Pro Tours that year. And fair to say, you did pretty well that year, winning on the Youth Tour, what's now the Development Tour. Did you find those early experiences of the PDC?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, that was back when the Youth Tour was played on the same day as the Pro Tour. So the Pro Tour finished around, 5-6 o'clock, and the Youth would start, an hour after. So I was playing a full day of darts pretty much. It's a bit like what the Challenge Tour and Youth Tour is now. There's two events basically. So I remember the first ever one, which was at Derby. I played Andy Smith in the first round, and then about 6 hours later, I started the Youth Tour.
What memories stick out from that first year on the PDC Youth Tour? It was very new what the PDC were doing, but there was a lot of quality players there, like yourself, Michael Van Gerwen, Joe Cullen, Michael Smith, Ricky Evans, Dirk van Dijvenbode. The list goes on. There's a lot of quality in the field. Yeah, it was. If you look at the players who were in the top 32 now, there was so many of them were back in the Youth Tour back then. And I was, I was pretty unknown, to be fair. It was only the people in the North East who knew who I was. And I just remember winning that first one, the first ever Youth Tour back in 2011 in Derby. That day I was out with Andy Smith there. It was a tough field. There was a couple of players missing. I don't think Van Gerwen and Michael Smith played it, but pretty much everyone else was in the field. Aaron Monk, Cullen, and things like that. A few years later, you do get that tour card and make your mark on the Euro Tour, reaching a quarter-final in Gibraltar while still having success on the Development Tour at the same time. What did you learn most from those first 2 years as a tour card holder? Just how hard it was, to be fair. It was quite hard to keep the tour card. I didn't realise how tough the Pro Tour was. Obviously, I knew it was going to be tough, but I didn't think it was going to be as tough as it was. And I had a couple of good runs here and there, but I never had any consistency. That run at the Euro Tour was a bit out of the blue, to be fair. Had a bit of luck that weekend as well, so it was just how difficult it was. Obviously, just trying to bring my game on a bit more. And although you lost your card at the end of 2015, you still had the Challenge Tour, the Development Tour, and you made a lot of deep runs, winning some titles. How much did having those events to play and help build your confidence? Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was sort of the standard I think I was at the time. I think the Pro, although I got my tour card, it was I probably wasn't ready for it. Maybe, I don't know, ability wise or mentally wise. And the Challenge Tour and the Youth Tour, that's what they're there for, aren't they? They're there to develop your game, and if you come off the tour, it's to get you back on in a couple of years or something like that. And it really did help me. I played some great players on the Challenge Tour. Rob Cross was on there 1 year with us, Ryan Searle, who are doing really well now, and got me to where I am now. And in 2018, you got back on the main tour via your success on the Development Tour, and at the end of the year, you come through 4 rounds to qualify for the World Championship for the first time. What were those 3 weeks like in the build-up to making your debut at Ali Pali? Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, the qualifiers was a brilliant day. My brother Scott was there with us, and it was just massive excitement. My family came down with us. My partner Danielle came down with us. It was just
yeah, to make your debut at the World, it's a pretty special occasion.
12 months later, ended 2019, you lose out in the final round of the qualifiers and it's back to Q School, where it must be the most games someone's won at Q School without winning their tour card outright. Perhaps not now we've got the two stages that were brought in this year, but 18 games you won across the 4 days to top that UK Order of Merit. What was the feeling like winning your tour card via Q School for the first time?
Yeah, that's when I thought I think it changed for me, because I realised I did it the hard way. I finished top of the points and things like that. I had to do it the proper way, and then I started believing a little bit more myself. I went into it pretty confident, even though I lost my tour card. I remember driving home after that World Qualifiers, and I had a chat with my brother Scott in the car, and I said, I'm ready for Q School now. Anyway, I'm not worried about it. I feel like I'm going to get through. So I think it was just even though I lost him at that day in that qualifier, I think I was ready to actually play and step up on the Pro Tour as well.
Fair to say 2020 didn't turn out to be the ideal year to have a tour card for your first year, but the last 3 months of last year, things seem to have really clicked for you. I want to pick out firstly that Euro Touring Sindel thing and the 100 average to beat Damon Hector. It was only 1 win, but to perform like that on stage, that must have given you a lot of belief as well.
Yeah, that was sort of the start for us when I started playing well. That game against Hector. The 2 Euro Tours I played pretty well. I think I lost out with Rob Cross that weekend, if I remember right. And I played well against him as well. But yeah, it was a great win against him. And I think he was probably the most informed player who wasn't a seed at the time. And to get him, it was a bit of a tough draw. But yeah, I played really well against him.
And the ball keeps rolling after that. A month later, you win through the Grand Slam qualifiers. And I've got to mention the game in the group stage with Joe Cullen. You had 300 plus finishes. Joe Cullen, he tops it with a 164 in the decider.
Yeah, it was a pretty good game, wasn't it? We started slow, both of us, and then I think the last 3 or 4 legs we both kicked in. And if I don't mind losing if someone's playing, that good. You hit a 12 dart to break my throw. You just got to hold your hand and say good dart. It was a great game of darts. It set us up for the game against Clemens as well.
Definitely, yeah. And the following month, you're back at Ali Pali. You and Lisa Ashton serve up a cracker for us in the first round. You then get past Jamie Hughes, and a little unfortunate, it's got to be said, to average 97 and lose 4-0 in the next round to Dirk van Duijvenbode, but into the top 64 a year into your tour card. As you turned the page on 2020, what did you take away from your season?
Well, that was my sort of goal, to get in the top 64, and I didn't realise how much of a significance the back end of the year was. To be fair, that's the first time I really took into account how much the Players' Championships, the Grand Slam, the Worlds, all accounts to the early rankings. I made pretty much most of my money from the back end. So to do it all in 3 months, I realised, if I do this again, I can get myself up the rankings. So yeah, it was a good year, and I was happy.
Definitely, yeah. That is the main goal, isn't it? Really, when players get that tour card, it is to be in that top 64 by the end of the 2 years. You're ahead of schedule with that. But what are your goals now as we get ready for the return of the Pro Tour next week? Have you got an eye on possibly qualifying for the World Matchplay?
Yeah, that's the main goal. I'm quite close, and I think I'm a couple of grand off getting in there. So, and there's a big pool of players who are around the 16 mark in the match play rankings. So if I have a good 2 weeks, the 2 Pro Tours, who knows? That's definitely my goal, though. Just getting the match play.
And on Twitter as well, some good banter before the first Super Series, posting up the picture of Real Madrid's ground while everyone else was posting pictures of Bolton's ground. But what is the best ground that you've actually been to?
Probably Old Wembley. I watched Scott play. He played in the national finals when he was under 11. I went to Old Wembley before it got knocked out. I think it was the second last game before it got knocked down that weekend. So that's probably the most famous ground I've been in.
Very nice. Well, speaking to your brother, he did mention that you did quit work before to go full time with darts, and now you work part time along with the darts. Do you feel like you've got the right balance for you between work and darts at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. It's financially it's perfect. It just takes the pressure off the darts. My work are really good flexibility wise. Obviously we're playing a lot of Monday to Friday events at the moment, so I've had quite a bit of time off work, and they've been great with that. And especially at the back end of last year when I was in TV events, every month they were pretty good as well with that. So I've got a good balance with work life, home life, and darts and everything. It just seems to be going well for us. Yeah.
Good to hear. We had Scott on the show, as you mentioned, last year to talk about darts in the North East. Now things are opening up again. We know you played a local comp earlier this week. How much of a help has it been for your career so far to have that flourishing local scene to play in over the years?
Yeah, I've said it on, I think, in a few interviews how good the dart players are in the North East. There's so many good players who aren't really heard of, who are world class players. They just never really give it a go, and you're playing them week in, week out. When you're not at the Pro Tours, it's perfect match practice, and it's just brilliant pressure wise as well, because they all want to take you out and stuff. So it's good pressure, and it's perfect practice. Yeah.
Lastly, looking a bit further ahead, obviously past the next couple of Super Series and the World Matchplay, what are your main goals really for the rest of this year and beyond? What would you like to try and achieve?
I'm not too sure rankings wise. I haven't really got a goal set for where I want to be in the rankings. But if I could get back to the Grand Slam, I really enjoy that competition. It'd be great with the fans in as well this year. World Championships obviously is always the main goal for every player. I think is to get there and have a good run. And if I do well, like I did at the back end of last year, I might get myself in the top 32. Who knows? But I'm just seeing how the next couple of weeks go in the Pro Tours, and hopefully getting the match play is my main goal at the moment.
Well, Adam, best of luck for the upcoming Super Series, the one after that, and your goal to get to the World Matchplay, and wish you all the best for the rest of the year.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks again to Adam for joining us, and a quick word from our sponsor Low 6, who present this show. There should be some darts contests to play on the PDC Picks app next week. Before then, though, there should be some football ones too, with the Euros almost upon us starting this weekend. And the big question is, who are you tipping to win Euro 2020?
Well, I think it has to be obvious. It has to be a final between the two debutants, North Macedonia and Finland. What else? What else could we possibly expect? Granted, debutants have done fairly well in this in recent Euros. I don't need to remind you about how Iceland got on their debut. Was it 5 years ago now? I'm sure you remember how that was. And there is a long history of teams on debut doing well, but I can't in good faith say that Finland or North Macedonia are going to keep that streak going. Who's going to win it? I'll annoy most of our listeners and say Germany.
Yeah, who could pick two debutants getting to the final of a big sporting event? I don't think that's happened for a long time. But it's 55 years of hurt now for England since they won the World Cup. We were all getting excited 3 years ago during the 2018 World Cup when we got to the semi-finals. We all said it was coming home. I don't think it's going to come home this year. I see that France are the favourites. They won the World Cup 3 years ago, so they're looking to do the double. I'm probably looking towards them, but I'll go for an outsider if you like. I'll go for Portugal to defend the title. They won it 5 years ago and they've got some good players, I think. So, yeah, that's my football knowledge for the Euros. I'm going to go with Portugal. And if you guys want to get involved, download the PDC Picks app. You can make your picks on the Super Series next week. You've got to be 18 plus, UK residents only. T&Cs apply. Please gamble responsibly. BeGambleAware.org for that. Now we'll move into our final guest on this week's show. And it is with the former World Championship quarter-finalist, the former PDC title winner, Alan Tabern.
I'm joined today by the Saint, Alan Tabern. Alan, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
And thank you for joining us. You've been playing in the PDC now for the better part of 20 years, but let's go right back to the start for you. What are your earliest moments of playing or being introduced to the sport?
I wasn't playing an awful lot of darts at the time that I joined the PDC, really, and I just started doing local stuff and county and stuff like that, and a friend of mine called Gary Weldon, who used to be a top PDC thrower himself, he kept asking me to join. I didn't think I was good enough, to be honest with you, but I went the World Championship qualifiers and lucky enough won on my first attempt, and that's kind of my first memory of the PDC, is going them qualifiers, and the rest kind of history.
So you mentioned you got called up, and that's why you went to the qualifier, and you weren't playing much darts. Were you playing anything, even at the local level in St. Helens?
When I say much darts, I was playing Super League darts and county darts, and just before county and Super League, I wasn't playing at all, really. And my brother used to come up because he played for the Lancashire youth team. And he used to ask me to have him a game of darts all the time, and every time I played him, I used to beat him, and he couldn't understand it. And he kept saying, you need to start playing again. So I went to a local competition, and there was a lot of good players in it, like Dave Chisnall was in it, Gary Weldon was in it, and a lot of Cheshire County players was in it, and I won it. and that was literally without practicing, and it started from there, and then I started playing for my local Super League, and then I got picked for Lancashire, and I played in Lancashire, and then that's when I was asked, like, I was murdered really off my good friend to join the PDC, because I started doing good stuff, and I don't understand it myself a little bit, and then soon realised I was good enough to play at that level. So that was basically it.
So what were you thinking at the World Championship qualifiers that year? Were you expecting to get through? Obviously, you ended up beating a major champion in Peter Evison last match to qualify.
I wasn't really expecting to get through, I'll be honest with you, because I'd rung up to join the PDC in the, I think it was the November, and they said that your membership runs out at the end of the year. So I said, well, I'm not going to join. I'll wait till January, then I get a full year's membership out of it, because I think it was about £350. And my brother rung me up and said, no, you need to join now and go ahead and do it now. So I did. And I went there not expecting anything really. I just played each game as it came. And I remember that game against Peter Evison. Played some really good players along the way as well. And I was a little bit shocked. But I don't know, something inside you just clicks when they shout game on, and you just play that game and try your best. I wasn't even looking past my next game, and soon enough I was in the final to qualify, and I won it, yeah. So, and I think I made it against Pete Everson a little bit harder than it should have been. I think I should have won a bit easier than what I did. And yeah, that was it. So I wasn't really thinking too much of it. It was just a case of just let's see what will happen,
And of course, what happened was you won that match, and then you won on debut at the Circus Tavern against Alex Roy. Did that experience give you the belief to commit more to playing the PDC?
It did, yeah, because Alex was in the top 20 in the world at the time, I think. So it was a tough draw it was a tough draw anyway, because Alex is such a good player. But it was a tough draw considering it was my debut. And my mindset for that game was, a lot of people qualify for the World Championships, and there's different routes to get in there. Some routes are harder than others, depending on where you live. And all I kept saying to myself is, I've got to go on that stage and I've got to win to prove I belong, because actually getting there is some kind of proof, but it wasn't good enough for me. I needed to beat a top player on stage, and then I could believe. And I was obviously a really big underdog in that game, but I remember it fondly and really well, and yeah, it did make me believe a little bit more that I could do something, and maybe just hold me own and compete, which is all I said to anybody that wants to join. If you can compete, you've got a chance, and that's what I did.
Did even more of that in the following year, winning your first title, qualifying for the World Matchplay, and then ending the year with a quarterfinal appearance at the World Championships. Looking back, just how special was that year, your first full year playing PDC?
It was extremely special when I think about it, because I think it was only my third event, and I won a Pro Tour. Back in them days, when I won I think it was the 2006 Northwest UK Open, when we played it in pubs at the time, and we used to play on one day, and the winner, or the two winners from each day, went through to the following day, the quarter-final. The last 8 played off to a winner, and I got the group from hell, to be honest with you, the last 8 draw, because I had to play, I think it was Andy Hamilton and Raymond van Barneveld to get to the final, and then I beat Steve Mace in the final, and that for me was one of my highlights of my career, because you don't win them events unless you're good enough to win them events. It's never handed to you on a plate, if you know what I mean. So to beat that calibre of opponent and win within my first 3 events, I think it was, that set me up for the year. And then, yeah, like you say, I went to play the match. The World Matchplay had qualifiers back then, so I had to go to, I think it was Hale Ireland, and playing a qualifier, and I beat my good friend who I room with now, Wayne Jones, in the final to get through and qualify for the match play. So, I still hadn't won enough ranking money, if you like, to qualify for the Worlds by right. So I still had to go and qualify again for the next year's Worlds, I think it was, and luckily enough I did. And yeah, it was such a special year for me because I didn't believe I could do all what I was doing, and suddenly I did start to believe because, like I say, you don't win them events. And back then, Phil Taylor just used to mop up everything, and you had certain other players used to win them. So to be in that list, it was really good.
So you mentioned Phil Taylor there. Another question about the World Championships the following year. You had a brilliant match against Phil Taylor, including a 160 finish before Phil came back and nipped it in the final set. What do you remember about that game?
I don't remember too much. I just remember that I think I threw it away a little bit. I think because the amount of people that have come to me and said you should have won that, and then my name could have been on it because the route to the final, although tough, it opened up from what you'd normally expect. Because it was the year Kirk Shepherd got to the final against John Part, if I remember rightly, and I think that would have been my next game. Would have been Wayne Mardle and then Kirk Shepherd, if I remember rightly, and then maybe John Part in the final. I'm going off of memory a little bit, so it was a missed opportunity, but things happen for a reason, and and what will be will be. And I didn't dwell on that game too much. It was just nice to compete with somebody like Phil and have a chance of beating him, because I think there was one leg to win a set where I'd left a double after 9 darts, and he took a 140 out to actually win the set. And if I'd have won that set, I think I'd have won the match because it would have put me extra in front. So, but that's why he is who he is, So a great experience, obviously, playing him on the biggest stage in the world and having a chance and competing with him and almost beating him. So, but yeah, great memories.
Well, you followed that up by pulling off some of those giant killings, beating Barney in Vegas, John Part, who was, of course, at that point the world champion in Blackpool, and making it to the top 10 in the world. That said, I think were you still working full time then, and did you ever consider going full time in darts?
I was working full time, and there come a point, and I can't remember what year it actually was, but it was when I was playing in the World Matchplay. I think I'd played Dennis Priestley in the quarter-finals to get into the semi-finals, and I remember going in work the following day. I'd just got beat in the quarter-final, and I remember going in work and my boss saying to me, "It's unlucky," and then we're not allowing you to change your shifts anymore. And I thought, you won't, because some of the other lads used to swap me shifts because I did afternoon shift and morning shift. And if I had a flight to Germany, say Friday night, they'd let me do their morning shift, and they'd do my afternoon shift, and then I'd just swap them back. And my boss wasn't being very supportive at the time. None of them was, to be fair, at St Helens Council, and I ended up finding myself in a position where it just wasn't going to work. So my wife said, "Well, I'll get a job, and you concentrate on the darts." So from not too long after that, that's what I did, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me, really. Because if they'd have been supportive, I think I'd have still been there. So it did me a favour in some respects. So I need to thank them, really.
Well, let's get a little bit more recent now. In, I think, 2011, the PDC introduced tour cards, and 2014, you had to go to Q School and gone a couple times winning your tour card back, of course. But how did you find the experience of playing Q School as a former top 10 player?
It's difficult, extremely difficult, and I have differing views from a lot of people about Q School, because back then there used to be an element in my mind that it wasn't necessarily how good you was, it was about what draw you got, because you could have two top players in the PDC that have only just lost the tour card playing each other, not getting a point, and then you could have two players that didn't play darts an awful lot, not doing very good averages, and they would win a point. And I didn't like the system, and I thought it was how they used to do it wasn't very good. But I mean, it was a step in the right direction to have a Q School and not just let anybody join. And the introduction of what they've done this year I think it's fantastic. I think it works perfectly. It's getting the right people to get the tour cards and making sure that it's competitive at every level. So I think it's a big thumbs up from me for the way they do it now. But back then it was daunting, and it was difficult, to be honest with you, because you can have a different mindset when you're playing at that level in Q school, because you play somebody you think you should beat, you take your foot off the gas a little bit, and you shouldn't. You should be totally focused, and you can lose games that, you know, if you're playing a top player, you're just switched on to play that top player, and it isn't very good of yourself to think like that, but it does happen.
Of course, you did get through in 2018, and what a year you had, qualifying for the World Championships for the first time in 7 years, and coming fairly close to knocking off the world number one in that match against Michael van Gerwen on the stage. What was it like getting back to Worlds after such after so many years away from it?
Well, it was exciting, to be honest with you. It was good. It was like, because I used to qualify every year and qualify for the match play. I think it was about 7 years on the run in the Grand Prix, and because obviously I'd been in a top 10 player, as you say, I was automatically in everything. So I thought my days had gone, to be honest with you, when I lost my tour card and started doing the Challenge Tour. I won a few Challenge Tours, so I knew I was still good enough to play at a certain level, but I never thought I would get back to playing on the world stage again, and kind of just enjoyed it a bit more. So I took a bit of pressure off myself, and when I got back in it, and then, you know, obviously I won my first game. So again, I'm thinking, well, I can compete again at this level, and I did a run Michael close. I think if he hadn't have had, I think it was an 11 dart leg in the last leg, I'd have took it to 2 sets all, and then who knows what could have happened. So, but he thoroughly deserved it. So he was the better player, but it was good to be back up there and compete again. So fingers crossed it can happen again.
Just a couple more questions. Start of last year, you again came through Q School, but not long thereafter the pandemic hits. How did you find playing last year once the tour resumed during the pandemic?
Well, we didn't really play much, did we? And we've done a few home tours, and I really do enjoy them. I don't really do online darts. I'm just not up for it for some reason. So I don't. You know, you're relying on trust issues with a lot of players, and you see a lot of things online about players. You know, the boards are not as clear, and people are saying things that are in the not. But when it's PDC, you know everything's there for you, and it's above board. So when they was asking us to do the home tour, I was enjoying that, and I was playing some nice darts again with no pressure really. So it's been difficult, don't get me wrong, and I didn't really like doing the Super Series ones where you was doing four days on a run. I wasn't too keen on them, to be honest with you, because if you have a bad day on your first day, and you know, and then your second day, it can spiral a little bit. Whereas when you do 2 on a weekend, you know, you can go home and come back, and it's a new day. Whereas you can have your 4-day events, you can have, you know, if you start off bad, it can spiral a little bit. So, but we're all adaptable, and we have to just deal with however it's dealing, however we can deal with it, and it's a big thank you to the PDC for doing the events in the first place and keeping it going. I think they've done a fantastic job. And it still gives me a chance to play darts as well, obviously. So, yeah, so I found it difficult a little bit. And my last one in Germany, I did quite well. So, hopefully I've turned a corner with it and I can get along with it a bit better.
And you mentioned that in Germany making a quarterfinal on the first day. I guess that's what you say. The first day matters so much for those 4-day events, but we do have the next Super Series starting, I believe, on Monday. What targets have you set yourself?
I haven't set any targets, to be honest with you. The Super Series in Germany was the first time. I didn't really want to go, I'll be honest with you. I'm not sponsored, so I have to pay for everything myself. So it was going to be a lot of money, something like £800 to £1,000 to go to Germany and get all my COVID tests and everything that goes along with it. And I'm not guaranteed any money whatsoever. You can lose in the first round for 4 days. And it's easily done because of the level of opponent. You can get Michael van Gerwen the first day, you can get Barneveld the second day, you know, and Dave Chisnell the third. And because that has been happening to me a lot. So it was a bit of a gamble for me to pay that money out. So I went there with no goals and just to try and relax and just not put any pressure on myself and enjoy it a bit. And it worked because I did. So I'm glad I went now, and I'm exactly the same for Milton Keynes this Sunday. I'm going down there this Sunday, and for the next 4 days, I'm just gonna not put any pressure on myself and just try and enjoy it a little bit. I know a lot of players say that, and the money element of it, what you're paying out, sometimes gets in the way of you enjoying it. But this time I'm just going to try and concentrate on just relaxing and enjoying it, and fingers crossed.
Well, Alan, hope you relax and enjoy the week in Milton Keynes, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks again to Alan for joining us, and we'll finish up the show. We've got one listener question to get through, and it comes from our good friend of the show, George Dobson, who says, if you had to put together a 4-piece band from the PDC Tour card holders, who would be in it, and who would play what, and what would they be called?
I'm just going to assume it would be a boy band with where they're just dancing, and some studio musicians off stage are playing the actual music and singing the actual songs. But I guess if this is the case, it'll be, I guess Peter Wright's a little too old to be in a boy band, so I'll leave him off. But I guess then it'll have to be Dimitri Vandenberg, Kurt Shepard, Devin Peterson, and Dirk van Dijvenbode with the most unsynchronized possible dance moves between them. But I have no idea what they'd be called. None whatsoever. And it would be terrible. But isn't that what this is all about?
Definitely is, and I like George for what he said in this question as well. He's put PDC Tour card holders, so immediately we can't make any mention of our 2 favourite players. We have got to do a bit of work for this question for our answer, and I've had a little think about it on what players I know that can play instruments or have got a bit of musical talent, which ticked off 2 of them straight away. You've got one of our guests on the show this week, Adam Hunt, can play the piano. Stephen Bunting, we've all seen the video of him singing a bit of Spandau Ballet at the Euro Tour, so he's going to be on the vocals for me. The next 2, they were the hardest to go by, and I'm probably just going to go off appearance. So I don't know what they're like on these instruments, but Ryan Searle looks like he could play the guitar. He's got that image. And I'll go with Michael Smith. He's got the haircut for a drummer, the Mohican, so that's my 4-piece band for that. And we'll go with Ryan Searle's nickname. We'll go with calling the band Heavy Metal.
That's not a bad shout. Anything else for this week?
Once I've heard back from those 4, because I'll be their manager and we'll be getting their recording contract sorted, just to say big thank you to our guests for joining us. Big thank you to you guys for listening. We appreciate that. Enjoy the Super Series next week. I'm off to play darts in a pub this week for the first time in 9 months. So I'm really looking forward to that. And my first start going in the treble 12 when I'm aiming for the treble 20. That's going to be good fun. We should mention our Dartscast trivia. Last week we had who was the first Welsh player to win a darts major title. Oliver James winning the News of the World in 1954. Congratulations to Gordon Skinner, who guessed that one correctly. This week's Dartscast trivia, the question is, how many of the countries represented in Euro 2020 have won a match in the PDC World Cup? Tweet us your answer, and as always, the first one to get it right will give you a shout out on the next one.
Don't think North Macedonia has, so
not yet, no.
I don't want to give away the full question. I of course, I said I thought knew it last week. The person who had popped into my mind actually never won the News of the World. Had lost the News of the World in 1960. It was Di Jones, who I was thinking of. But at least I was in the right tournament. But congrats to everyone who got it right, and thanks to everyone who took a gander at that question. Thanks to all of our sponsors and guests, and to all of our listeners this week. We'll be back, I guess, next week or the following week once the Super Series is done to recap it and start looking even closer ahead to the World Matchplay and, well, some of the WDF and other events that are going on as the world opens up again. But for Alex Moss, I am Burton DeWitt. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep hanging tight.